it comes to horror games, there is one important question that needs to be answered in order to figure out what will and what won't work for you. And that question is, what are you afraid of?
Are you afraid of loud noises and jump scares? Or are you afraid of tight camera angles and the dread that comes with diving into the unknown? Are you afraid of aliens, or zombies, or sentient choo-choo trains? Or are you afraid of more cerebral things like questioning the nature of existence, paranormal entities invading your suburban life, or most frightening of all, questioning your own repressed sexuality? We all have that thing, or those things, that keep us up at night. So, again, I'll ask, what is it that scares you? And for me, I have to admit, while I am definitely afraid of more than just a few things, they come in the form of subject matter that very seldom, if ever, finds its way into horror video games.
I'm not afraid of monsters, I'm not afraid of zombies or demons. Loud noises don't startle me in any sort of impactful way. I mean, I've listened to far too much heavy metal and even power violence and operated one too many jackhammers back in the day for that sort of thing to get under my skin.
And I'm definitely not afraid of being chased by monsters or Sloth from the Goonies, especially in the context of a video game where a fail state is really the worst thing that can happen. And speaking of fail states, games like Outlast or Alien Isolation, where you're consistently being chased, that illusion usually only works once for me, because the second that you fail and you have to replay a section more than once, the dread is out the window, and before long, frustration becomes the dominant emotion. But there are things that do scare me. Societal collapse, typically at the behest of corporate interests, people, full stop. People who will step over others to get ahead, or will devolve into primal states if they have been denied what they need for far too long, or governments that will carry out mass murder campaigns or genocides for further consolidations of power. And then I am also freaked out by the deleterious effects of mental illness. Schizophrenia, dementia, psychosis, even just major depression. The mind and the way that we perceive reality is endlessly interesting to me, and especially in those cases where the wiring or chemical receptors glitch out and cause things to get twisted.
I grew up in a family where mental illness was prevalent, and I've been dealing with my own specific flavor of it all my life. And I can tell you, when it gets dark, it can get dark. And sometimes terrifying.
At this point in my life, the dark and dreary of real life simply outclasses any type of spring-loaded cat or any computer-generated character being jibbed by an alien species. And so, more often than not, when I think about horror games, I categorize most of them in the realm of spooky fantasy, survival simulators, or dumbed-down third-person shooters with bad controls in order to ratchet up the dread by giving the slow-moving enemy characters an edge. But give it time and the arthritis that I am slowly but surely building up in my hands after years of breaking down my body through things like skateboarding, climbing, and fighting games, eventually that condition will surely turn every action game that I play into a survival horror affair in due time. For me, I find horror more often than not in video games which are completely outside of the genre. Will O'Neill's Little Red Lie, Richard Hoffmeyer's Cart Life, Lucas Pope's Papers, Please, Ninja Theory's Hellblade, or even that one really fucked up moment in Metal Gear Solid The Phantom Pain where you are tasked with executing your own squad members after a virus outbreak has put them into quarantine. For me, horror is something that is incidental. A dread that you feel when something messed up or horrific is happening around you. And those games that I just mentioned, those moments, they left my mind reeling for hours and heightened my anxiety far more than anything that I encountered in a game like last year's Silent Hill F. But every once in a while, a horror game does work for me. Visage from Sad Square Studios taps into suburban decay, conspiracy theories, and real-world horror like family annihilation in a way that kept me glued to the experience long after the horror tropes stopped working for me. David Szymanski's Fingerbones is basically a walking simulator in terms of gameplay, but the story that plays out will have you unnerved for days after playing it. Iron Lung by the same dude plays up isolation and claustrophobia in such a way that I feel genuinely uncomfortable while playing it. Mostly because of the fact that more than anything in this life, being trapped in a hopeless and desperate situation is something that hits far too close to home for me, and that game made me want to jump out of my skin. but other than examples like that, most of the horror games that I dig are usually hybridized to the point of being horror adjacent. Alan Wake and its sequels, the A Plague Tale duology, Shadows of the Damned, BioShock, and Condemned, all titles that have the trappings of the horror genre and definitely the potential to scare the shit out of the player, but these are all titles that purists will correctly put somewhere in the action horror realm or call horror themed instead. But my limited interest with the horror genre, it isn't from a lack of trying. Every time a new Resident Evil comes out, I pick it up, even though I have at the point of this writing never completed a single entry. And I'm usually there for any release in the mainline Silent Hill franchise. But while I have actually finished a few of those, Silent Hill 2 and its remake, Silent Hill 3, PT, I mean, that one still counts, right? Silent Hill The Short Message, and most recently, last year's release of Silent Hill F, I have a very mixed perspective on that series, with my opinions on each of the games that I have finished ranging from overrated and bloated all the way down to poorly designed and awfully paced, with just one of them being what I would consider to be an actually terrific horror game. But I'll leave it at that and let your imagination wander to which ones I could possibly be talking about. I know how some of that fan base can be, and I'm better suited by keeping it vague. But I will say this, the reason that I can at least sometimes vibe with Konami's offerings way more than Capcom's is that series' dedication to mixing in psychological horror far more than whatever the fuck this is. I like my horror to get under my skin. I like it to linger in the back of my head for days. I like when developers can leverage simple concepts and cut right to the discomfort. And with that said, this video is about a single developer who has gone on to make not just one but two games and then inspire a feature film that I find not only endlessly interesting, but this whole franchise also had the ability to linger long after all three of those experiences were over. If you fire up lone developer Kotake Create's 2023 release of the Exit 8 today, it does not meet you with a menu. It doesn't allow for you to configure your experience before starting. It simply drops you directly into its environment. A tiled pedestrian walkway in the Japanese metro, complete with those ubiquitous Tenji blocks which are used to help blind people get around. On the walls are advertisements, signs, maintenance doors, and vents. On the ceiling, you can find security cameras, fluorescent lights, and most importantly, a lit up navigation sign that tells you that you are on the path towards the eponymous Exit 8. There is no music to speak of. Instead, the soundscape is dominated by electronic buzzing and the whirring of fans and other off-screen machinery. And so you start to walk towards the exit, your footsteps becoming the loudest sound so far as they reverberate off of the cold tile surfaces, and walking toward you is a lone, middle-aged businessman. You pass him, you pass through the hallway, you make a quick left, a sudden right, another left, another right, and then you are in a hallway that looks identical to the space that you've just moved through. And just as you start to push forward, another middle-aged businessman comes walking around the corner in the opposite direction. You repeat the process through, then left, then right, to another identical hallway and another identical man. At this point, it should be starting to set in that something is not right, but you commit to moving forward. Through, left, and then right, and you are back in that space once more, with this same guy repeating the same exact walk towards you. It is only once you complete this third lap through the loop that you see it. A wall sign that was never there before, but it denotes that you are closing in on gate 0. And next to it is a helpful directory, but instead of offering up information about the metro system, it reads, in both Japanese and English,
異変を見逃さないこと。
Don't overlook any anomalies.
異変を見つけたらすぐに引き返すこと。
If you find anomalies, turn back immediately.
異変が見つからなかったら引き返さないこと。
If you don't find anomalies, do not turn back.
8番出口から外に出ること。
To go out from exit 8. If the game didn't make itself clear, you are stuck in an infinitely looping liminal hellscape, and the only way out is to follow these rules. Move forward in the direction that the exit sign is pointing you, search the tunnel for anything that looks out of place. If it is clear, you move forward, but if you do see something weird, turn around and make your way back in the direction that you just came from as the passageway twists upon itself in order to correct its trajectory, returning you to the path towards the 8th exit. As of the time of this writing, after the most recent patch that was released last August, there are close to 40 anomalies that can occur. And while they are kind of necessary to talk about in order to discuss what this game is and how it is structured, they can be spoilers in and of themselves. So this may be where you should pause the video if you are interested in the game and you haven't played it yet. But if that does describe you, please drop a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. That way you can find your way back here after playing the game for yourself. It shouldn't take long, seeing all the content should take around an hour or so, but enough of that, back to the video. Every time you make your way back into the main tunnel, there is a chance that one of the anomalies will be present, ranging from the subtle, like a security camera suddenly having a red record light on it, to the completely obvious, like these two Yakuza motherfuckers standing in the middle of the drag menacingly.
Go! Kill this arrogant motherfucker!
A leaking vent, or the middle-aged businessman suddenly turning his head to look at you, the eyes on a poster notifying the public that this corridor is under surveillance suddenly moving to track your movement, or seeing the exit sign suddenly upside down. Every single one of these things is incredibly obvious once it's been pointed out. But in practice, and especially to the uninitiated, some of these more benign remixes are incredibly easy to miss when you start scanning the environment thoroughly. And that is because once you've been introduced to the rules, this game plays off of RNG. Every time you come around the corner, there is a chance that something will be amiss. But it is also just as likely that when you turn that corner, the space will be perfectly normal. Or at least as close to that as possible given the circumstances. And then there are the stakes. If there is no anomaly, passing through the tunnel without missing anything will cause the sign referencing the nearest gate to tick up, from 0 to 1 to 2, and so on until you finally make it to your destination. But if there is an anomaly, and let's just say you were far too busy focusing on the advertising posters trying to see if something had changed, that you suddenly lost count of how many doors there were on the right side of the tunnel and you continued onward like nothing was wrong, no matter how close you are to the final exit, gate 1 or gate 7, missing a single anomaly will cause the whole space to reset itself, returning you to gate 0. And it is with this mechanic where the game got under my skin. Anyone who has spent even a little time on the aesthetic side of the internet, hell, it's probably more mainstream than even that at this point, is probably aware of the concept of liminal space. Invisible to most for years and then popularized in the months leading up to the pandemic, nestled away in communities on Reddit and 4chan, people had been sharing pictures of sometimes bizarre, sometimes nostalgic, and always creepy environments that were completely devoid of people. And with this aesthetic on the rise, at some point between 2011 and 2018, an image was shared that would launch this aesthetic into overdrive. You've seen this image before. It made the rounds on plenty of message boards, but it wasn't until it was shared on 4chan's paranormal themed board X on May 12, 2019, where this image took on a life of its own. When an anonymous user posted this image and asked other users to post disquieting images that just feel off, hoping that others would be able to share equally captivating pictures. But instead of just images, an anonymous user not only gave a name to this image, but also wrote a short creepypasta to accompany this picture. And with this post, the internet exploded. Within days, others began sharing stories about the backrooms on creepypasta boards, and soon, backrooms dedicated boards. The mythology expanding with each post, and soon it became common for similar creepy images to pop up with their own descriptions, creating the concept that the backrooms was an infinitely vast network of liminal spaces, and within that network were levels that became more and more disquieting as explorers found themselves deeper in the hellscape. It's analog horror in the vein of the SCP Wiki, which I talked about at length in my video for Remedy's Control. So check that out if you're interested or curious. Or better yet, check out the upcoming Backrooms feature film directed by YouTuber Kane Pixels, a YouTuber and Blender filmmaker making his debut on the silver screen at the end of this month. But even though the Backrooms was a phenomenon, liminal space as a concept and as an aesthetic exploded when the Backrooms hit the scene. And once the pandemic hit, Most of us, especially people like me who lived near Los Angeles at the time, found ourselves in places that felt increasingly abandoned and liminal. And with no shortage of abandoned and empty locations, users all over the internet, myself included, began uploading liminal space photographs in order to document the alienating environments that we suddenly had found ourselves in. Again, this is a phenomenon that I covered years ago in what is arguably my favorite video that I've made to date, titled The Liminal Space and Hauntology of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, so check out that video next if you are having fun with this channel so far. But there is a reason that these spaces have become synonymous with horror and anxiety. And the quick and dirty version is that these are spaces that were always meant to be transitory, spaces that you were just meant to pass through, hardly noticing them at all. But they were always meant to be full of people. Office buildings, high schools, pizzerias, and of course train station tunnels, places that are typically background or placeholder locations, suddenly made alien and creepy once the quiet emptiness becomes deafening. And when coupled with the anxiety and end of the world fear that came with the early days of the pandemic, these places and these images suddenly felt like they represented a snapshot of full-on societal collapse and a post-human era. And the Exit 8 was made with all of this context in mind. This metro station is a liminal space. I mean, hell, it may as well be a backrooms level. And in this aesthetic choice comes all of the unease and all of the science fiction mind-bending metaphysics associated with conjuring up either of those phenomenons. But then there's also the feeling of being utterly trapped. When you miss an anomaly in this space, you are clawed back into its depths, over and over again, all of your progress taken away with each mistake. In theory, the Exit 8 can be boiled down to a game of I Spy or Spot the Difference. A game where detail-oriented players will quickly find themselves escaping this liminality through raw observation. But where Exit 8 was inspired directly by the Spot the Difference pioneer Finnish developer Natovia and his breakout hit 2018's I'm on Observation Duty, there are some crucial differences. Observation Duty is an indie game in the vein of something like Five Nights at Freddy's, where the player operates a suburban home surveillance system remotely over the course of a night, and the player is tasked with creating logs of any anomalous activity that can be spotted while flicking through each room's feed. But if too many disturbances go unchecked, the feed is suddenly cut as a fail state. It is an interesting title that feels like digital voyeurism, similar to how the early Paranormal Activity movies felt. Minute after minute of staring at a mundane setting while waiting for something to pop off. But where the game does tap into a similar level of paranoia that can be felt while playing Exit 8, that same hyper-awareness being focused onto a seemingly everyday locale, Observation Duty is decidedly less engaging. First, there is a level of detachment that is inherent to the security camera concept, where you never feel truly grounded in that environment, and then there are the anomalies themselves. While there certainly are some creepy and oddball things that can show up in the house, the ones that are most likely to tank your playthrough come in the form of overly subtle changes. A missing cup, a small round object appearing on a desk, things that are incredibly too easy to miss. And I understand that these choices are what lend themselves to Observation Duty's difficulty, but in that game the fail state is brutal, because each run takes entirely too long to ramp up. And then there is a looseness and interpretive nature to how you actually report each anomaly, as you have to figure out exactly which category each strange happening falls into. And then after filing a report, you have to wait for feedback on whether or not you are doing a good enough job to stay alive, which makes each failed run feel protracted and cumbersome. It's a neat project. It clearly inspired the subject of today's video, but I had my fill of it quickly. And even though the game sold well enough to birth an entire series, a series that is now on its 8th entry in just under 8 years, and the scope of each entry has grown undeniably, I found myself more often than not bored while playing this game. Maybe the series gets better as it went on, but unless someone I trust gives me a hard recommendation to continue with the series, I think I'm content with what I've seen here. Consider that my mini review of I'm on Observation Duty. But where that 2018 title feels like a proof of concept more than anything, the anonymous Japanese developer Kotake Create a solo dev who worked at an unnamed studio in the industry for 4 years before striking out on their own into the indie space. This solo dev took the design philosophy of observation and filtered it through PT, borrowing its looping structure and applying it to a more simplified environment. But where PT ratcheted up the dread through more and more macabre imagery before devolving into classic Kojima fuckery that had the internet working together to crack the game wide open and discover the secrets to the final few laps through its murder house, Exit 8's simplicity is its greatest strength. Unlike observation, you are in this environment, and unlike PT, it is always very clear what you have to do, and the feedback is nearly instantaneous. Even though failure to confirm an anomaly in Exit 8 is ultimately punished by being thrown to the beginning of the loop, effectively making it so that part of the fear or dread that you feel while playing this game is ultimately tied to losing progress, the Exit 8 has two really good things going for it in this regard. First, failure does feel like it is entirely on you, and it builds tension. You spend however long you feel is necessary in the tunnel. You obsess over every little detail. You track the things that you are certain belong. But when you come around that corner, every time there is an anticipation met with hitched breathing. And when you ultimately see that you are back at gate 0, the momentary deflation is met with a tightening of resolve. Next time I'll be better. Next time I'll catch it. And to be fair, if you did miss something before you commit to rounding the corner, effectively resetting the loop, you can backtrack and examine the configuration that just screwed you over. But the other bit of smart design work is that Kotake Create wants you to see all of the content. And each time you successfully call out an anomaly and run in the opposite direction, that particular instance is flagged and subsequently far less likely to occur again, making it so that unseen aberrations are weighed far more favorably the next time the RNG rolls. I mentioned before that the pool is fairly limited, with less than 40 events to decipher and a 100% completion time that comes in easily under 1 hour. But that playtime and limited scope actually work in this game's favor. You come around the corner, you see something new, you turn around. Something subtle is happening, and you are now obsessing over the details only to get it wrong. But you keep going, because eventually you will catch on or the RNG will favor you. But that realization only comes after you complete a run of this game. While you are in it, every decision feels do or die. Every all clear feels like a commitment. And every time you step around the corner and get the feeling that something might be off, you then have to wrestle with the uncanny. Something is different. I just don't know what it is. And I think that is what Exit 8 does better than most horror games I've ever played. The fear, maybe fear is too strong of a word, but the tension comes from your ability to trust yourself and how easily that trust is eroded. That nagging feeling that comes with each, was that poster there before? Has this place changed, or am I just noticing a detail for the first time? And then there are incidental sound effects like an ambient mechanical clicking that happens every so often that makes you fall headfirst into self-doubt. Fuck, was that sound signaling that I should turn around? I didn't see anything, or at least I don't think I did, but something feels off. Or does it? I don't even know anymore. Fuck. For me, that uncertainty, especially after you've gone some distance into the tunnel, it hits hard. It makes you question everything. It paralyzes you. It makes you want to give up and just stay put, afraid to deal with the consequences of being wrong, worried to confront that there was something so obvious that you just overlooked, that you can't trust your own perception or even your own mind. When the Exit 8 manages to hit those levels, it feels extraordinary. And it's funny because even though this game typically plays in the mundane, there are a few anomalies that lean far more into traditional horror tropes. A door banging as you walk past, a truly diabolical anomaly where an exit to the outside can appear long before it's supposed to, meaning that it in of itself is an anomaly, but the illusion is so real even though you are certain that it will end your run. Lights going out just as you get past the halfway point of the tunnel and you have to run back in the pitch black, or worst of all, when you think you notice the outline of a man camouflaged against the far tiled wall, and you make the mistake of getting too close. But even though those instances can raise the heart rate for a second and can hit you with a quick
Shit. Got your ass.
in practice, as you push onward, you often find yourself hoping that the more overt anomalies will kick in. Please, game, do something wild, because I can identify that quickly and run for the opposite side. Anything to break the uncertainty and dread that comes from this game's quieter moments. And in that regard, I think the Exit 8 is special. When we play horror games, there is a tension and release, but there is also a dread that comes with knowing that an incoming jump scare is just around the corner. But here in the Exit 8, I would push headlong into them knowing that seeing one was getting me closer to my goal, effectively creating a moment where the horror is almost welcome. But no matter what configuration of the tunnel is around the next corner, the tension stays throughout. Even when you pass the final gate sign, you know you are almost done, but at this point, you know that this title cannot be trusted. And the last hallway is brutal. It plays by the same rules as any other previous level. But once you get over the self-doubt and you round that final corner, the game ends with a peaceful escape and into the credits. There is no denying that this game is the product of one man with a very simple idea. It is not a visual showcase, even though it is running on Unreal 5. And even though there is a lifelike realism to the tunnel itself, pretty much everything else in the game betrays the devs' limited resources and scope. And in certain cases, you can practically smell the asset store stank. But for a debut project, I think this went as well as any solo dev could hope for. Financially, the game did well, exceptionally well, and it even built a cult audience. And just about anyone who plays this title, myself included, is almost guaranteed to stick around after the credits to see what the endgame looks like. After those credits roll, you are dropped back into the game. But now there is a sign that details exactly how many unseen anomalies remain. And given that carrot on a stick, most are likely to chase after it, hoping to see every weird anomaly that they can find. This game is special considering the breadth of what's here, but it is entirely worth your time, and considering that it retails for $3.99 at full price and regularly goes on sale, it is entirely worth your money as well. I mentioned at the beginning of this review that a patch made almost 2 years after release brought the anomaly count up to close to 40. A patch that came out well after this game's sequel, Platform 8, was released in May of 2024, just 6 months after the release of Exit. But there is a very good reason for this, and it's something that I've kind of been talking around. Like I said before, the Exit 8 did extremely well, and considering that this was a one-man passion project that was developed in around 9 months and leaned heavily on the Unreal Asset Store to keep costs down, the over 2 million copies that this game moved by August of last year is staggering. The game spread well online, bolstered by tons of YouTube and Twitch coverage, and obviously, with a success like that, Kotake Create had to strike while the iron was hot, jumping directly into a follow-up. But just a little over a year after Exit 8 was released, the legendary Japanese movie studio Toho, best known for creating the Godzilla franchise, announced that production had begun on a live-action film adaptation of this indie game. Genki Katamura, a Japanese filmmaker and author best known for his behind-the-scenes roles of producer, and a filmmaker who has helped make such hits such as Your Name and Suzume, was confirmed as taking on the roles of both director and co-writer for this project, with filming taking place from late 2024 to 2025 in Tokyo, Japan. And with the project finished in early 2025, the movie was selected to be screened at Cannes Film Festival for that year, and continued the festival circuit until it was released in Japan of August of 2025, where the film closed out with the highest opening of that year for a live-action movie in Japan, netting around $6.5 million in box office sales for its first 3 days. And with all that success, the movie continued to show in foreign markets until it was finally distributed all the way out here in the US by Neon just last month. And having played both games and having heard about the film performing well internationally, of course, I went to check it out, and I absolutely loved it. The film is completely true to the game, operating under its same rules and utilizing the same setting, eerily brought to life through Keisuke Imamura's gorgeous cinematography. But instead of just being a raw visual representation of the game, the film is punched up a lot by not only Kawamura's writing, but also through stellar performances by Kazunari Ninimoya, a prolific Japanese actor probably best known for his role of Shuichi in the Japanese film Blue Light, and internationally in Clint Eastwood's Letters from Iwo Jima as Private First Class Saigo. But not only is Ninimoya a terrific actor, but he is also a lifelong gamer and was familiar with the title before even taking on the role, and was apparently very helpful in aiding Kawamura in developing some crucial scenes. And the middle-aged businessman was brought to life by Yamato Koichi, a famous Japanese stage actor who brought a humanity to this character that was completely shocking given the source material. I won't go too in-depth on the plot of the film, as I strongly recommend it whether or not you have played the Exit 8, but the basic premise follows Ninimoya as the lost man. This character is on his way to a temp job and is shown to be somewhat rudderless and even a little spineless in the early minutes of this film. He keeps to himself when he sees injustices playing out around him, instead choosing to be invisible and numbing himself by doom scrolling. But as soon as the train that he's in stops, he picks up a call from his ex-girlfriend where she reveals to our main character that she is pregnant and at the hospital wrestling with whether or not she should terminate the pregnancy. And while the lost man tries to communicate with his ex, he stumbles into the looping passage and loses signal. From that point on, the movie plays out very much the way that the game does, with the same rules of see an anomaly, turn around, miss an anomaly, reset the loop structure. But the tension is ratcheted up from the beginning because of what's at stake. This man has to get out, but also has to wrestle with his feckless nature, all while making decisions that will shape his life going forward. That is, unless he finds himself trapped in the loop forever. Kawamura did a terrific job with the narrative, and it landed far better than I was expecting for a story that was born out of pretty much nothing to hook onto from the source material. Honestly, in my opinion, it might be the best video game adaptation that I've ever seen, even if that isn't exactly the highest bar to clear. But when it comes to how this movie captures everything that the game is known for, that dread, that tension, that slow unraveling as the uncertainty kicks in, and how being sunk back to the beginning when you miss something can absolutely paralyze you, all of that was expertly brought to the screen. And while the earliest section of the film plays out in first person as a clear homage to the game, the fact that we are seeing the Lost Man tackle this from the outside adds extra dread. The camera will hang on an anomaly even though our protagonist is clearly missing it. The man starts talking to himself when pointing to the permanent fixtures of the space, just how players might when they played through the game. Door, vent, posters. But even more fun is how this plays back into the game itself. In a lot of ways, this film not only captures the sensation of playing the game, but it also even operates as something of a tutorial for future players, while simultaneously giving you that voyeuristic kind of feeling from watching someone experience the game for the first time through something like Twitch. It is a great watch, and I truly recommend that you check it out. But even more fun is how the movie plays back into the game itself. The last patch, I should say at least as of now, because I can't predict the future, came out just as the movie was doing the festival circuit. And in order to commemorate the film's release, Kotake Create implemented anomalies that were specifically designed for the movie back into the game, bringing not only new content to the title, but also very fun Easter eggs for return players and those who had decided to play the title after checking out the movie. As of the time of this writing, I mentioned the 2 million copies that the game sold, but internationally the film has made over $44 million at the box office, and while the budget hasn't been directly confirmed, estimates place the overall cost of the production somewhere between $1.4 million and $4 million total. When talking about the game, for a passion project that was released for $4 a pop, to then go on and move that many copies, and then to inspire a film that made back its budget by close to 50 times over, this is a rare double indie success story in 2 separate mediums, and I really think that that should be celebrated. But that brings us to the final topic of this video, Kotake Create's 2024 release, the follow-up to the Exit 8. When this game boots up, it is pretty striking. Just in aesthetics alone, this is a huge leap forward. Similar to the dev's previous game, you are just dropped into this setting. But instead of finding yourself back in the hallway, this time you are in a perfect rendering of a Japanese EMU commuter train barreling through a nondescript metro system. And when I say perfect rendering, anyone who has done any traveling through Japan can attest to this. From the modeling to the texturing down to the lighting, it is hard not to be impressed when you first see this title in action. And the mechanical buzzing and bobbing of the train car and the sound of coasting on the rails do everything they need to in order to further sell the illusion of being in this train. The car you find yourself in is almost completely empty, just you and a very familiar commuter. But with the only walkable path being the aisle between the seats, you really only can move forward into the next car. A car that once you make your way through the sliding doors is completely identical to the last, with the exact same passenger as last time. Platform 8 also uses the looping structure, but you soon find out that this game is less of a spot the difference and more of a deal with the difference affair. Like the last game, you need to proceed forward in hope of reaching your destination. In this case, the 8th stop, or Platform 8. And how you do this is by moving from car to car, but each time you do, there is a chance that an anomaly will be present. But instead of just walking away from them this time, most of these events involve figuring out some sort of small puzzle or minigame. Whether it be running through at a breakneck pace, dodging supernatural enemies, finding something that has changed in any one of the ad banners in the car, or playing red light green light with this cursed little girl, each car offers up a novel bite-sized experience. An idea that Kotake create credits to the game Subway Midnight, which at least partially gave him the idea for this title, as in that game, each train car is a different world in and of itself. In Platform 8, you move forward, try to figure out what you have to do to go to the next car, and if you are successful, the LED notification board will tick up letting you know that you are one stop closer to where you're trying to go. But where Exit 8 celebrated the mundane far more than the surrealist nature that would sometimes push the game into more deliberate horror territory, Platform 8 is an overt surrealist horror experience. Whether it is blood-soaked handprints suddenly covering the windows from the outside as you push through, having to dodge a headless businessman, or something like this. This game wants to freak you out, this game wants to weird you out. And this means that there are far more opportunities for you to get got by something paranormal before being shoved to the beginning of the loop. Where Exit 8 more often than not made you question yourself and your sanity by staring far too long at the mundane, Platform 8 lets you know that you and this world have already gone insane. The mileage of this experience will vary from player to player, as Platform 8 feels far more genre-bound than the original, and depends on jump scares and creepy imagery to unsettle the player. But for me, I found most of them to be creepy funny, more so than spooky scary. It's a vibe for sure, but sometimes I did find myself missing more of those quiet moments. And between the LED notification board and clues found within some puzzles, Platform 8 is a much easier experience to wrap your head around. Even if there is one particular anomaly that if you fall for its trap, it will require for you to restart the game entirely, as it intentionally softlocks the experience. Where Exit felt like a game of learn this world's logic and proceed with caution, Platform feels more like a haunted house attraction. Each room is authored and designed to mess with the player, but it is an entirely linear path that most will stumble their way through. And while it is a similar hour or so long experience to see everything, and it is similar in the fact that speedrunners have completed both games in just over a minute, at least for me, I felt like my first playthrough granted me just a little less agency than I felt playing Exit 8. Maybe agency is the wrong word, but in this title, I always felt like I was moving forward despite the creepy and weird stuff that was happening around me, instead of frozen and pondering my surroundings the way that I did in the first title. Platform 8 is still definitely worth checking out, and considering that it was released for the same exact budget price of $3.99, and it too goes on sale regularly, if you have any interest in it at all, or you enjoyed the first game at all, or the movie or whatever, I fully recommend that you grab this one as well. And especially so, just so that you can experience the final ending. Again, we are in spoiler territory, so you know the drill. But the Exit 8 has two different endings. 3 if you count the softlock one. On your first playthrough, each train car will test you until the indicator tells you that you've reached your stop. At which case, you simply walk out into the brilliant white light similarly to Exit 8's celebration of freedom. But just like the previous game, Kotake Create wants you to see all of the content before moving on from this title entirely. So your subsequent playthrough changes things up a bit. Instead of surviving till the train lets you off, instead the notification sign tells you exactly how many anomalies remain and pushes you through all of them in a bizarre showcase, a surrealist gauntlet. But after ticking that count down to 0, the train stops in a completely different place. But instead of telling you about what happens, I'll just let the footage roll. Even though Platform 8 is the follow-up, it does appear to function as something of a prequel, the start of a spiral into more cursed liminality. And for me, that ending wrapping these two games up that way made the whole experience of both more than worth it. Kotake Create has publicly stated that for now, they are done with this series, clearly not wanting to end up in the trap that other indie devs like Scott Cawthon or Natovia have found themselves in. And considering how quickly he churned out this follow-up, I think that should be applauded. It would be entirely too easy to fall into the endless pattern of semi-annual releases, remixing this winning formula time and time again until only the most ardent of supporters were remaining. But instead, this solo dev is on to something new. A game that was originally being called Strange Shadow, and now has the working title of Pale Dots. Not much is known about their next game at this point, other than it appears to be in third person and takes place in space, but I can confidently say that it's on my radar now. And considering that it was originally planned to be released last year, but has now been postponed indefinitely in a it's done when it's done kind of development choice, I'm even more so interested. Take all the time you need, and make something rad. And between the successes of the first title and the second, even though I couldn't find any hard sales numbers, but word of mouth and sales estimates seem to indicate that Platform 8 didn't quite catch on as well as the first game, and then the success of the movie, and then the time put into patching the OG to fall in line with some of the stuff from the film, this solo dev has clearly been busy. On a final note for Platform 8, I will say this. In the Exit 8 film, there is a key scene which takes place on a train before spilling out into the cursed hallway. And this scene is revisited throughout the film. And it is fairly easy to imagine a world where this could be used as a jumping off point for a potential sequel if they decided to take it in that direction. But I will say this as a fan of the property. The film works as well as it does because of certain scenes that lean into the interpretive, scenes that leave the audience with a general sense of unease and mystery. And to take away from that for a quick follow-up would likely feel more like a cash grab than anything else. Clearly the team that worked on this movie did a stellar job. And I'm sure that if they decided to take the source material of Platform 8 and do what they did the first time around, they could likely find success again. But if they ultimately decide to do a sequel, I hope that they take care, and I hope that they have some creative freedom. Because I would hate for the movie execs to focus on the numbers far more than the art. Because in the case of the Exit 8 and all of its incarnations, art is what got us here. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. And if you liked the video, please consider dropping a like or a comment, and if you really dug it, please hype the video or subscribe, as all of those actions really help with discoverability. And for fans of the channel, you may have noticed that this video is not the next installment of my ongoing Drakengard Nier retrospective. And don't worry, that's still coming. I'm a weirdo and decided that in order to do the Nier video justice, I was going to play both Nier and its remake back to back, both to 100% completion, in order to have the most informed perspective possible. It's on track to be released next, but it did entail putting well over 150 hours of playtime between both versions. So hold tight for what is likely to be the biggest and most important video in that series yet. That's all for now. I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, you're all beautiful people, and I hope that you have a great day.